When Ethan Cole, a three-time world kickboxing champion, landed in London, he wasn't planning to start trouble, at least. Not real trouble. His trip was supposed to be a mix of sightseeing and publicity stunts, all streamed live to his millions of followers back home. But as his private car pulled up near Windsor Castle, an idea started forming in his mind. A dangerous, foolish idea. Standing outside the gates was a Queen's Guard immaculate in his red uniform, tall bearskin hat, and rigid posture that made him look more like a statue than a man. Ethan couldn't resist. "Look at this guy," he said to his phone, turning the camera toward the soldier. "They say these guys are tough, but come on, they just stand there all day doing nothing. Let's see if he can handle someone real." His chat exploded with laughing emojis and dares. "Push him. Bet he won't even flinch. Show him who's boss, Ethan." The champion smirked. He loved the attention. At 32, Ethan was at the peak of his career. Muscles carved from years of combat sports, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and an ego that had been inflated by years of media worship. Tourists gathered around him now, recognizing the famous fighter. Some cheered, some watched nervously. But to Ethan, this was just another performance. "All right, folks," he grinned. "Let's see what Mr. Statue here is made of." He strutted forward, chest out, every movement calculated to look good on camera. He towered close to the guard, stepping right into his personal space. His phone was still live, capturing every second. But Guard Mason Blake did not move, not an inch. His face, half hidden under the shadow of his tall hat, remained blank. His hands, gripping the ceremonial rifle, stayed frozen. To the untrained eye, he looked indifferent, passive, weak, but to someone who knew better, there was tension in his shoulders, a coiled spring waiting to snap. Ethan, of course, didn't see it. "Come on, big guy," Ethan taunted. "Do something." He even waved his hand right in front of Blake's face. Still nothing. The crowd began to murmur. Some were amused, others uneasy, but Ethan felt the rush. He leaned in even closer, grinning for the camera. "I bet you can't even blink without permission." That was when it happened. In one swift motion, faster than anyone expected, Ethan's hand shot out, giving the guard a light shove on the shoulder. It wasn't a hard push, more playful than violent, but it was enough to cross the line, enough to turn a performance into a confrontation. And for the first time, Guard Mason Blake moved, not much, just a slight shift in his stance. But for those watching, the air seemed to change. The tourists fell silent. The Queen's Guard, who had appeared so still and harmless a moment ago, now radiated something else entirely, an unseen force, heavy and undeniable. Ethan, sensing the change but too proud to back down, chuckled nervously. "Relax, man. It's all for the stream." But the guard's face remained expressionless. Little did Ethan know, the man standing before him wasn't just some ceremonial ornament. Mason Blake had served over a decade in the British Army's elite SAS unit. He had survived missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and places that would never make the headlines. Every scar on his body, hidden under the perfect uniform, told a story Ethan could never understand. And today, in the heart of peaceful London, he was about to teach the fighter a lesson that no championship belt could ever prepare him for. The moment Ethan Cole's hand made contact, Mason Blake came alive, not with wild aggression, but with the cold, precise force of a man who had spent years mastering the art of controlled violence. His left foot shifted, anchoring him. His right arm moved with mechanical efficiency, raising the butt of his rifle just enough to create space between himself and the intruder. "Step back, sir." Blake's voice was low, calm, but edged with steel. It wasn't loud, but in the sudden hush that fell over the crowd, it sounded like a gunshot. Ethan blinked, thrown off balance. He'd expected silence, or maybe an awkward shuffle, not this sudden, chilling authority. His live stream was still running. Thousands were watching. He couldn't back down now. His pride and his brand depended on it. "Or what?" Ethan sneered, puffing his chest. "You gonna stand there and stare me to death?" But even as he spoke, something gnawed at him. The way Blake's eyes locked onto his. Not with anger, but with the flat, emotionless gaze of someone who had seen far worse threats than an overconfident kickboxer. Blake repeated, "Step back." This time, his stance shifted just a fraction. It was enough. Ethan, driven by impulse and the roaring digital crowd egging him on, made his next move a quick, flashy side kick aimed low, intended to make the guards tumble. It wasn't meant to hurt, just to embarrass, just to entertain. But Blake was already moving. In a flash, his rifle came down not as a firearm, but as a weapon of leverage. He deflected Ethan's leg with practiced ease, stepping in close, turning his body to absorb and redirect the force. Ethan's balance broke. His foot missed its target, leaving him exposed for a fraction of a second. But against someone like Blake, a fraction was all it took. Blake's free hand snapped forward, striking Ethan's chest with a palm heel sharp, controlled, but powerful enough to send the fighter stumbling back to steps. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Ethan's face twisted with shock. No one had ever handled him like that, not in front of fans, not in his own domain. His ego flared white hot. "You wanna go?" he barked, squaring up now, no longer playing for laughs. But Blake didn't move. He stood tall, rifle steady, posture perfect. "I will defend myself if you attack again," he stated, voice cold as ice. "Step away." "I will defend myself if you attack again," he stated, voice cold as ice. "Step away." For the first time in years, Ethan hesitated. The energy in the square had shifted. The tourists, once giddy with excitement, now watched with wide eyes and tight lips. Their phones still recorded, but their laughter had died. Even the online chat on Ethan's stream had turned. "Bro, stop, this is getting serious." "Dude, that guard is ex-military. You messed up. This ain't funny anymore." Ethan's fists clenched. He could feel the weight of all those watching eyes both online and around him. His pride screamed at him to strike, to win back control of the moment. But some deeper instinct, the kind that had kept him alive in the ring, recognized the quiet, dangerous calm in Blake's stance. This wasn't a game. Not anymore. Colonel Hughes, an officer overseeing the area, had begun to stride over, his sharp eyes already reading the situation. Had Ethan made another move, things would have escalated beyond saving, but the fighter stepped back, half a step, then another. His breathing was heavy now, not from exertion, but from the crashing wave of adrenaline and shame. He forced a smirk for the camera, trying to salvage his image. All right, all right. "We're done here. Respect to the guard, yeah?" he muttered, voice brittle. Blake said nothing. He didn't need to. His stillness now felt different, not weak or passive, but unyielding. A wall that no showboating champion could knock down. As Ethan turned away, the tourists parted for him, not with admiration this time, but with a kind of silent reproach. And behind him, Guard Mason Blake resumed his post, his face returning to its stoic mask, as if nothing had happened. But the air told a different story. And for Ethan, the lesson had only just begun. The next morning, the square looked the same. But to Ethan Cole, everything felt different. He stood at a distance now, away from the main path where tourists gathered with their cameras. His usual swagger was gone. In its place was a heavy, uncomfortable weight pressing on his chest, the kind that no amount of training or bravado could shake off. Ahead of him, Mason Blake stood at his post, motionless as ever. But now, Ethan saw him differently. Blake's uniform was spotless, his bearskin cap perfectly aligned, every inch of him the image of ceremonial precision. Yet beneath that polished surface, Ethan knew now, was something far deeper. The discipline of a soldier who had faced real violence, real danger, something far beyond the cheap punches and kicks of staged fights and online challenges. The crowd today behaved differently too. Where yesterday there had been laughter, shouts, and reckless dares, now there was a hush of respect. Tourists approached quietly, keeping a respectful distance. Cameras still clicked, but more discreetly. Parents whispered to their children, explaining the honor behind the tradition rather than treating it like street theater. And watching all of this, Colonel Hughes passed by during his routine inspection. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene, the quiet order, the renewed sense of respect, and allowed himself the faintest smile. Sometimes, he reflected, the best lessons weren't taught with speeches or rules, but through actions that cut straight to the heart. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, folding his arms as he watched. His own online world had erupted overnight. His video had gone viral, but not in the way he had hoped. Comments flooded in. Some mocking, some critical, many calling out his arrogance. The story had spread, the cocky fighter humbled by the stoic guard. Memes appeared, showing his stunned face next to Blake's unyielding stare. It stung, badly, but beneath the sting, Ethan felt something else. A strange, grudging respect. He thought back to the exact moment Blake had looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with that cold, measured calm. It was the look of someone who had faced real battles. Someone who didn't need to shout or show off to prove his strength. And Ethan, for all his titles and trophies, realized now that he had only mastered one kind of power, the flashy, performative kind that won crowds but crumbled when met with real steel. He let out a slow breath, his fists unclenching. Different kinds of strength, he muttered to himself. For the first time in years, he felt small. But oddly, it wasn't a bad thing. It was humbling, grounding. Maybe this was what he had been missing all along. As the square bustled gently around him, Ethan made a quiet decision. No more cheap challenges. No more stunts to bait attention. It was time to start respecting the deeper forms of discipline, the kind that Mason Blake had demonstrated with such simple, devastating clarity. His phone buzzed. Another message from his manager, urging him to spin the story, to make jokes, to reclaim his image before the internet's fickle attention shifted elsewhere. But Ethan ignored it. For once, he wasn't thinking about followers or views. He was thinking about how easily his carefully built persona had cracked when faced with a man who didn't need cameras to validate his worth. He glanced back at Blake one last time. Still standing, still silent. A living monument to quiet strength. Ethan gave a small nod, not that Blake would see it, or acknowledge it, even if he did. But it wasn't for Blake. It was for himself. A simple gesture of respect. Late, perhaps, but sincere. As he turned to leave, the square seemed a little brighter. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan Cole wasn't walking away from a fight. He was walking towards something better. As Ethan Cole disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind the square, and the man who had quietly dismantled his pride, a new kind of silence settled over the scene. Mason Blake remained at his post, as motionless as ever. His eyes, shaded by the brim of his bearskin cap, didn't flicker. His breathing stayed steady. To the casual observer, nothing about him had changed. But those who watched closely, those who had witnessed yesterday's confrontation, sensed it. A subtle shift. The tourists today gave him space, not out of fear, but out of earned respect. Their cameras were lowered just a little more. Their footsteps grew lighter as they passed. The mocking smiles had vanished. In their place, genuine admiration. It was an unspoken understanding, shared by everyone present, that stillness was not weakness, that the quietest man in the square had, in truth, been the strongest all along. Colonel Hughes, passing by on his morning route, noticed the change. He paused, observing the way the visitors now kept a respectful distance from the guard. There were no signs posted, no loudspeakers demanding courtesy. And yet, courtesy had been restored. He allowed himself a small nod, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his weathered face. Experience had taught him that the most enduring lessons weren't hammered in through lectures or rules. They were absorbed through moments that peeled back the surface and revealed the truth beneath, and this square, this morning, was a testament to that truth. Far away from the ceremonial post, Ethan Cole sat alone in a quiet cafe, his phone face down on the table. The usual stream of notifications still buzzed in his pocket: comments, likes, shares, and snide memes. But for once, he didn't care. His mind kept circling back to the image of Blake standing firm, unmoved by his taunts, his kicks, his bravado. It wasn't just physical endurance that had undone Ethan, it was something deeper. A discipline built not in the spotlight, but in silence, in hardship, in facing dangers far greater than a viral internet challenge. Ethan stared at his reflection in the window. For the first time, he didn't see the cocky fighter that his followers cheered for. He saw a man who had confused loudness for strength, and he knew now how shallow that strength really was. The lesson stuck. But deep down, he was grateful for it. Back at the square, the routine continued. The changing of the guard proceeded with its usual precision. New tourists arrived, drawn by the allure of tradition and ceremony. But among them, word had spread. The story of the fighter and the guard had taken on a life of its own, a quiet legend, whispered from one visitor to the next. It wasn't about humiliation or victory. It was about respect, about seeing beyond appearances, about understanding that strength doesn't always shout, it often stands silently, unyielding. And now, as you, the viewer, sit watching this story unfold, ask yourself, what would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have recognized the depth of discipline behind the guard's stoic silence? Would you have seen past the ceremonial uniform to the combat-hardened veteran beneath? Or would you, like so many, have mistaken stillness for weakness? Think about the people in your life, the ones who don't seek attention, who don't boast about their struggles, but carry a quiet strength that's easy to overlook. This story isn't just about a guard and a challenger. It's about all of us, about how we judge, how we respect, and what we choose to admire. If this story taught you something new, if it made you pause and reflect, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe more people should hear stories like this, that challenge assumptions and reveal the truth behind appearances, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story that digs deeper into the traditions and people we too often take for granted. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now for more tales that reveal the hidden layers behind the world ceremonies. And as always, we'll see you again tomorrow at the same time with another brand new story. Until then, remember, true strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands still.